What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the best phones that you can buy with SD card support. So I'm going to be giving you guys some options here. This was highly requested, and these are the phones that I've used with SD card support. So the Galaxy A55 is a very good option. You can find this for around $350 brand new, and it's a pretty solid phone. You got an aluminum frame glass back, so it kind of has that more kind of premium feel to it. It is also IP67 dust and water resistant. This phone does have kind of thicker bezels up front here, but it's got a Super AMOLED 120 hertz display. It is HDR10 plus. It is 390 for the PPI at 1080p, and overall it's a solid display, pretty nice colors, and I really didn't have any real complaints with it. It is a mid-range phone, so they're gonna add kind of thicker bezels, but overall it's a pretty good display here. This phone will get the 4 Android updates as well, and it is running the Exynos 1480 chip. You do have micro SD card support. The base is 128 gigs and 6 gigs of RAM, and basically performance on here was pretty decent. It wasn't anything too crazy. I wasn't really mad at the Exynos processor. I was able to do very basic things, and overall it was a pretty speedy phone. When I was using the phone for the most part here, it's not really a gaming phone or anything like that, so just do note that, but it is an overall decent phone when it comes to performance here. We do have on here actually pretty decent stereo speakers as well too. You also do have on here the fingerprint scanner. It is an optical one. It works perfectly fine. And this phone, it also does have, I think the biggest highlight here is it has pretty good cameras. So it's got a 50 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 5 megapixel macro. It can only shoot in 4K 30, and you have a 32 megapixel selfie that shoots in also 4K 30. I thought the shots looked pretty decent. Good dynamic range, good detail. Overall, the shots were pretty solid. The video also was pretty good too. So overall, for a mid-range phone, I really didn't have too many complaints with this one. Also, the battery life is also another highlight. I got excellent battery life. It has a pretty big battery at 5,000 milliamps with 25-watt charging. Overall, it was a really good battery experience. So the phone itself is pretty solid for the most part. All right, guys, next is the Moto G Stylus. The one I got from Walmart was 200 bucks, but it was locked to Straight Talk. The unlocked ones are going like 300, 350. I'll have those links down below. This is an awesome phone, guys. One of my favorite phones of the year. But it's an all plastic design, but it really doesn't feel cheap. It's got that nice textured back. It's got a built-in stylus, so you could take advantage of the software that Motorola has baked into here. It has no water resistance rating, guys. Just water repellent design. So you do have a really nice POLED display here. It's 120 hertz, 1200 nits peak brightness at 6.7 inches. Respectable bezels here, and it is 1080p 395 for the PPI. Overall, just a pretty beautiful display. So I really like the display colors and clarity wise. This phone will only get one major OS update, and then it will get security patches for a few years. So that's kind of like the trade-off here. The processor is actually pretty good on here. It's the Snapdragon 6 Gen 1, and it's very efficient. It does not heat up. It's really snappy, along with the Motorola software on here. And overall, it was just a really, really nice experience. Playing games on here was pretty solid, again, for a mid-range phone. I was pretty impressed. Now, this phone does have micro SD card support. It's 128 gigabytes of internal storage for the base model, and then 8 gigs of RAM. So overall, very solid phone. And then we also do have a headphone jack as well, guys. That's one of the coolest things about this phone is they actually threw in the headphone jack too. Stereo speakers are solid on here. We also do have optical fingerprint scanner, which works fine. The cameras are actually pretty solid on here as well. It's a 50 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide, and then you also have a 4K 30 video with a 32 megapixel selfie, but the selfie camera only shoots in 1080-60. Overall, the stills were actually pretty good on this phone. Like I said, I was very impressed with the entire phone. Stills look great, dynamic range, ultra wide was pretty nice as well too. Just overall good colors. I wasn't mad at the cameras at all. Now the battery life is also awesome on here too. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 30-watt charging, and they even threw in wireless charging as well too. So that's why I said this was one of my favorite phones. I think the only downside with this is that you only get 1 year of updates, but if you can look past that, I mean, this is an excellent buy. All right, guys, next is going to be the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra here. This is still a very popular older flagship that a lot of people like. You can find it for around that $300 price point. And this is a pretty big phone. It's a very boxy phone as well too. It's stainless steel, IP68 dust and water resistant. This one does have, of course, the built-in S Pen that you can take advantage of. And then you also do have a massive 6.9-inch display here. It is dynamic AMOLED, 120 Hz, HDR10 Plus. It is a 1440p display at 496 for the PPI. You can only use the 120 Hz in 1080p though. Now this phone got its last major OS update with Android 13. It is currently getting security patches, and it's still a very fast phone with the Snapdragon 865. It really just blows through anything. Opening apps, animations still are really smooth. Also, you can still play PUBG at really good settings as well too. I think you can still play at 90 frames last time I checked. And you also do have micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 12 gigs of RAM on the base model. This phone is still really powerful and still really fast. Now, this phone also does have pretty decent stereo speakers. The ultrasonic fingerprint scanner is here. You can also take advantage of Samsung desktop support. And you also do have on here pretty decent cameras. It's a 108 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel periscope telephoto, 5 times optical zoom with the 50 times hybrid zoom. You also do have a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot an 8K 24, and you have a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. This can still take very good photos. I think the only thing that's kind of aged about this phone is that in low light it doesn't do as good of a job. And then also I think the selfie camera could definitely be a little bit better. It is a little bit soft these days. And besides that, I think this phone still takes fantastic pictures in good lighting conditions. So overall, the cameras are still pretty solid. You do have a 4500 milliamp hour battery, 25 watt charging, wireless and reverse wireless charging. The battery life experience on here is just okay. It's not anything that is super crazy. If you're a light user, you can kind of get through the day pretty easily. But if you're a more heavier user, you're going to have to charge this phone for sure. So overall, definitely an excellent pick to consider. All right, guys, next I want to talk about the Galaxy S20 Ultra here. This is a fantastic phone that actually is super underrated on the channel, and I would highly recommend this one. It's actually a lot cheaper than the Note 20 Ultra. You can find it for around that $200 price point. And overall, this phone, it's a big phone, but it's way more comfortable to hold. It's got the aluminum frame. It's IP68. And yeah, this is just way more comfortable than the Note 20 Ultra. You also have a very big display on here. It's a 6.9-inch display. It's dynamic AMOLED, 120 Hz, HDR10 Plus at 1400 nits peak brightness. And it is a 1440p panel at 511. It still looks fantastic. Again, you cannot use this in 1440p at 120 Hz. You gotta use it in 1080p. And this phone, same situation, still getting security patches. Last update was Android 13, One UI 5.1. It's got the Snapdragon 865 on here. You also have micro SD card support, and you also have 128 gigs of internal storage, and you also have 12 gigs of RAM. Performance is still excellent on this phone. You can still pretty much play most games. Like I said, PUBG ran really well on here. And I legit have no issues with performance on the Snapdragon 865 models. So the speakers are actually fantastic sounding. They sound really good. And then you also do have very fast fingerprint scanner on here. And then you do have on here, I think, still pretty decent cameras on here for the most part. It's pretty much the same as the Note 20 Ultra when it comes to like low light photography. You have a 108 megapixel standard, 48 megapixel periscope telephoto, 4 times optical zoom, and then this was the first Samsung phone to do the 100 times zoom as well too. You also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide 0.3 depth sensor. You can shoot an 8K 24 with a 40 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. Overall, just fantastic cameras. If you're in good lighting conditions, you still get a really good shot. But like I said, the low light photography is not as good, and the selfie camera, I think, does look a little bit dated. But besides that, overall, you do have really solid cameras on here still. It's got a 5,000 milliamp hour battery with 45 watt charging, wireless and reverse wireless charging. Unlike the Note, this phone actually does a fantastic job with screen on time. It lasts a really, really long time. I did a battery drain test on this one if you guys want to see that. But this phone's battery life is excellent. So it just has excellent battery life. Last on the list is the LG V60. Guys, this is a fantastic phone to consider. It's very cheap as well too, around that $200 price point. One of my favorite phones on the list. It's got a really nice design still. It's aluminum frame, IP68 dust and water resistant. You also do have dual screen case support with this phone, and then you also again have SD card support, and you also have a headphone jack with a quad DAC, so you can get some really nice high quality audio out of this phone, which is really awesome. You also have a 6.8-inch POLED display. It's HDR10 plus 1080p 395 for the PPI, and overall still a very nice looking display here. And like I said, you put the dual screen case on here and you pretty much have two phones here, which is really nice. So if you are into multitasking, you can do some really nice multitasking on here. You also do have, the last update was Android 13, Snapdragon 865 on here, and this phone still runs extremely fast, just like the Galaxy phones. This chip is really efficient. You have, again, micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM on the base model here. Very good sounding speakers on the V60 as well too. Good amount of bass, overall really nice sound here. You also have the fingerprint scanner. It is an optical one. It's okay. It gets the job done. It's not the fastest, but it definitely works. And the cameras on the V60, again, just like the Galaxy cameras, this one doesn't do as good in low light, but in good lighting conditions, this phone still can take an excellent shot, takes really good video as well. 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide. You got a 0.3 depth sensor, shoots in 8K 30 with a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 30. Like I said, you can still get a really good shot out of the V60 here. And actually, battery life is still really good on the V60. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. You do have wireless charging on board as well. And overall, I've always had pretty good screen on time and really good standby time with the V60. So overall, you can find some other phones with headphone jacks like the Sony Xperia phones. Those phones can be a little bit expensive, but I would definitely look at those phones as well too. And yeah, so be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next